to go ahead and welcome everybody to the February 3rd Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. We will have the minutes to approve from the January meeting at the next meeting. I'd like to welcome our City Council member. They rotate through, and Kevin Boone will be our member for the next, is it 6 months?
10.
Oh, God. I mean, no. For the next 10 months. Kevin will be on our Planning and Zoning Commission. So we will go ahead and start our agenda. We're going to go, I was requested to, since they're so quick, start with the two 115211 proposals. So we'll start and go D, E, and then back to A.
Good afternoon. I am Samara Wally, and this is case number UR 20.01, Mediacom for Morphe Avenue. This is the request of Mediacom for an 115211 utility review and approval of the proposed underground installation of approximately 1,106 linear foot of fiber optic and CATV cable. The project will run along Morphe Avenue from Eddington Street east to Hollow Haven Street. Here you have a map of the subject area along Morphe Avenue. You see it is near County Road 13 at the and Morphe Avenue. And then this is just an aerial view of the subject property or the subject site. This is a draft site plan from Mediacom showing just the area of work along Morphe. And there will be a little more information about that site plan. Our comments, the proposed utility construction falls within the corporate limits of the City of Fairhope. Any portions of the project affecting public right-of-way maintained by Baldwin County or the Alabama Department of Transportation shall require permits through Baldwin County Highway Department or ALDOT. Mediacom proposes construction of the project utilizing directional boring. They did provide a description of the work, and they do intend to bore 48 inches minimum depth along Hollow Haven. However, they did not provide us with illustrations showing definite depth. Therefore, we have requested that they provide us with plans and profiles before the issuance of any permits. Of course, the site plan shall comply with state, federal, and local requirements, and we have listed those below. That is the City of Fairhope Wetlands Ordinance, the Red Soil and Clay Ordinance, and the Fairhope Erosion and Sediment Control Ordinance. State and federal permits shall be on file with the City of Fairhope's Building Department prior to the issuance of any permits, and the applicant shall provide as-built profiles of the installed lines showing the exact depth. Staff recommends approval of the application subject to the following conditions: submission of plans and profiles drawn to scale, verifying the new conduit has the required 36-inch separation prior to the issuance of a right-of-way permit, and also consultation with the city's horticulturist to determine the required depth to bore so that no trees are impacted by the project, and reflect this depth on plans and profiles.
All right, thank you very much, Samara. Are there any questions for staff at this time? All right, thank you. Is anybody here on behalf of Mediacom? This is not a public hearing. Does anybody from the public have anything to say, though? If not, commissioners?
I've got a question for Richard. Richard, hello, Richard. In your permits, we had a discussion bunch of meetings ago about problems that y'all were having with the directional bore impacting some of your utilities. Did y'all ever put a permit in your permit fee a performance deposit for utilities that are doing this work in the event they rupture a line or they sever a line and y'all are called out?
We haven't gone to that, length of, trying to get their attention yet, but we do have pre-construction meetings with them, and we discuss all of the issues that we have, and You know, we've shut contractors down in the past, but no, we haven't gone to the extent of having them require a special bond or anything like that. They, you know, we don't want them to get too bent out of shape if we destroy some of their utilities either. And,
Well, as long as they
you know,
don't
it
require
kinda
you to
works
put a
both
bond up,
ways.
that's all right.
So we're trying to be gentlemen about the entire thing. And
But if they break a line, they break a water line, or they cut one of your utility lines, I mean, it's
They
you
pay-
guys that are out at,
we do, they pay to fix it. I mean, they reimburse us for all the costs, but, and, you know, we treat them differently if they seem to want to break more than one or two. Like, there was
is that the level?
there was
or
one
two?
boring contractor that just was in it to make money on how many feet he put in a day, and he didn't care if he went through a line or not.
Mhm.
But we solved that problem working with, you know, the contractor, and that's,
Okay.
we're doing the best we can to be, you know, cooperative, but at the same time, we want to protect our infrastructure as well, and that's what we're doing.
Well, I think what I had told you, in my business, in the forestry business, when you got a logger that shows up on a given piece of property, they put a substantial performance deposit down in the event for road damage or fences or creek bottoms or whatever.
Right.
And, I mean, it's, most people have an understanding, that's sort of a given. Anyway,
And
just food for thought.
we may get to that.
Okay.
You know, we don't want to be posting too many bonds ourselves for, you know,
I get them to put money up, man.
yeah. Mr. Chairman,
Do you
I'll
have an
make a
issue?
motion.
Do you have any issue with this?
as a matter of fact, I'd like to make a motion if anybody else doesn't have any questions.
I've
I
got
make a
a,
motion, UR 20.01 be approved, subject to the conditions that staff recommends.
got a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. All right, motion passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda will be UR 20.02, item E.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commission members. My name is Carla Davis, and I'm here to present a utility review for Southern Light LLC, case UR 20.02. The summary of a request. We have a request for Southern Light LLC for an 115211 utility review and approval of the proposed underground installation of approximately 991 linear feet of fiber optic cable. This project will run along Morphy Avenue, Young Street, and Horns Lane. Here we have a zoning view with the map showing the subject site area depicting Morphy Lane, Young Street, and Horn. Again, an actual aerial view of imagery of the subject site area. Comments. The proposed utility construction falls within the right-of-way maintained by the City of Fairhope. As all work is being done in Fairhope's right-of-way, all appropriate permits will be requested to begin construction. Listed below are typical general comments for the City of Fairhope right-of-way projects. Comments. The site shall comply with all state, federal, and local requirements, including but not limited to the following City of Fairhope ordinances. As you can see, there are 3 different ordinances that we identify, which is
Probably
13.7.
skip it this time since we heard it on the last one. if you
Yeah.
want.
Okay. So the applicant shall provide as-built, and the sign and/or door hangers must be used to help notify the citizens in the area of the work being done. So that's just a little bit different from the last one. Recommendations, staff recommends approval of UR 20.02 conditional upon the following. The applicant shall follow the general comments related to utility work, and the applicant and applicant's contractor shall follow the right-of-way installation, permitting, and work procedures documented provided by the building officials.
All right.
And we're
Any
done.
questions for staff while she's here? All right, thank you, Carla.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I had a question.
Yes, sir.
How are these as-bills provided?
Nothing really consistent.
The only reason I ask, in the years previous, they've always been, as you say, very inconsistent. And unfortunately, when you needed them, they either weren't there or somebody just decided to write some stuff down or this type of thing. So I was interested in the fact, because it's pretty important. to have some well-documented as-bills.
Well, part of the improvements we've made with staff, with a GIS person and Jaren, with CAD, they are helping get those, even though they're coming in with different formats and putting those into a central location. So that's improving daily.
Does the engineer provide these? I mean, does he sign off that these are accurate and true?
I'm not sure about that one.
And Councilman, Councilman, if you'll allow us to address that question at a future meeting.
Yeah, not a problem.
And what we'd like to do is, before I answer that in great detail, I'd like to consult with the building official. Because when we provide, this planning commission is the best mechanism for these 115211. And then once it goes through our review at the planning stage, we hand it over to the building official for the necessary permitting. But that's a fantastic question, and I will get you a better answer at a future time.
Because they weren't provided.
Yes, sir. Possibly so, but I'm going to get you a better answer.
It would be beneficial that the engineer would sign off on them as accurate and true.
Yes, sir.
Instead of somebody just sitting there on there one night drawing some stuff up that are similar to what the plans were, but have nothing to do with what was actually installed.
And Councilman and Commissioners, of course, when we go through an as-built process on a typical subdivision, we're getting from the engineers of record, we're actually getting ArcMap shape files of the various utilities and the various infrastructure. And then we take those, and our GIS staff actually implementing those and uploading those into existing maps. So that way we have master utility maps. A little bit different flavor for these utility reviews because these are utilities by private companies operating in the right-of-way. So I will get you a better answer in the very near future.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
Is anybody from Southern Light in attendance? Do you have anything to add, or just here just in case? All right, thank you. Commissioners, any questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Richard, what about this one? You good?
I'm sorry?
You good on this one?
Yes, sir. You want me to make a motion?
Sure, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion, case number UR 20.02, be approved based on the recommendation of the staff.
I've got a motion. Do I have a second?
Second?
All right, I've got a motion and a second to approve the staff recommendation on UR 20.02. Any further discussion? In that case, all in favor say aye. Any opposed, say nay. All right, motion passes unanimously. And now we'll work back up the agenda to item A, subdivision 20.04.
Evening, Chairman, Commissioners. Start off by saying congratulations, Go Chiefs, on their Super Bowl victory last night.
Oh, you're going to say War Eagle after that wonderful basketball game Saturday.
War Eagle as well after the basketball game. It's been a great sports weekend. What we have tonight is a two-lot minor subdivision, SD 20.04, Bancroft and Pine. It's a public hearing considered a request of Wise Properties for plat approval of Bancroft and Pine subdivision. Property is approximately 0.4 acres and is located at the northeast corner of the intersection of Bancroft Street and Pine Street. On your screen on the left, you'll see our zoning map. Subject property is zoned B4 and is highlighted in a black border. On the right side is the aerial showing two buildings. The building on the left was a residential building that is no longer there, and then the commercial building on the right side. And the property line will be going just on the west side of that commercial building that is still in place. And as you can see on the plat, this plat has been revised to move the property line to the west about 1.5 feet to allow for some extra construction on the building to come up to building code and meet fire rating. Some of the site data, as I said, it's B4 and it's located in the central business district. Given some of the asterisks that are at the bottom coincide with that. There is no minimum lot size. There's a 20-foot front and a 20-foot rear setback. Being that is in the central business district, as the asterisks point out, a non-residential building shall be built at the right-of-way line. As a condition of approval, that note will be changed to actually reflect exactly as it does in the zoning ordinance under the central business district section. It's been reviewed according to Fairhope subdivision regulations, and as a minor subdivision, no land disturbance or development is proposed at this time, and it complies with the approval standards of Fairhope's subdivision regulations. Staff recommends approval of SD 20.04 Bancroft and Pine subdivision with the following conditions: that the building on proposed Lot 2 shall meet the fire rating in all current building codes. 3, add a signature block for utilities for Fairhope Gas. And the third that I'll verbalize was not in the report was to revise that first asterisk note to read as Article 5, Section B.4A does in the zoning ordinance. On behalf of staff, I'll be happy to answer any questions, and Mr. Larry Smith, the engineer of record with SD Civil, is here tonight as well, and can also answer any questions.
Mike, when you say Lot 2 shall meet fire ratings, what you're really saying is when Lot 1 is developed, that it'll be developed so that Lot 2
No.
is in conformity?
Lot 2, with the existing building, with that property line being right at the edge of the building, the fire rating within 5 feet of a property line requires a certain fire rating, and I'm not going to quote it exactly. Eric Cortinas in the building department will be inspecting that to ensure that. If the property line was 5 or 6 feet over from the existing building, then the building would be fine. But because of building code, where that new property line is going to be placed. And then on Lot 1, whenever construction begins on that, the appropriate fire ratings would have to be done for any building on that lot as well.
I thought you had to have 4 hours of separation between the two buildings and which one it came from. I didn't know
Well,
if it mattered much.
right now, if there's nothing on Lot 1, one building on Lot 2, so there's nothing on Lot 1 for the building on Lot 2 to conform to.
No, I understand. I was just saying that, I mean, it may not be a big deal. I was just saying that if you've got to have 4 hours between the two, I guess it's just chicken and egg, never mind. I'm just saying you can say that when Lot 1's developed, that it'll meet, for both or something.
Right.
Because if Lot 2, I mean, I don't know, you expect them to go back and rebuild that building if it doesn't meet the fire code?
Well, that's why they moved the property line over about 1.5 feet to allow,
So it does.
for that work to be done,
Got it.
and that side to be fire rated.
Got it. Okay. Mr. Asman. Is that it?
Any other questions?
Any other questions for Mike?
Nope.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, that's it.
Anybody here wish to make a presentation on behalf of the developer?
I think he summarized it pretty well. I had the same understanding you did on the separation, but due to the nature of it, we went ahead and I believe they've already completed the work to fire rate it, and we moved the line over to be able to accommodate any work needed for that. So unless y'all have any other questions, I'll sit down and let anybody who's here from the public speak.
Questions for the developer? If not, I'll go ahead, thank you. I'll go ahead and open the public hearing at this time. Does anybody have any questions or concerns about this item? It's on the intersection of Pine and Bancroft Northeast corner. If not, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing at this time and turn the meeting back over to the commissioners.
Motion, Mr. Chairman. Case SD 20.04, Bancroft and Pine subdivision. I move that we approve subject to staff recommendations.
I've got a motion to approve subject to staff recommendations. Do I have a second?
Second.
Further discussion? I don't think I have a conflict of interest, but I did get a certified letter on this because I own a building catty-cornered. But I don't think, hey, Ken, would that give me a conflict of interest? I got a certified letter because I own a building catty-cornered. I don't need to, I don't have any financial interest in it one way or the other. Okay. In that case, any other further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda, SD subdivision 20.05. Thompson Hall quadruplex, a 16-unit multiple occupancy project.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioners. Thompson Hall quadplexes, as you see in the title right there, we're recommending tabling for further study, which we'll explain here in just a moment. And Commissioners, as you're accustomed to seeing our zoning map as well as our aerial photograph showing the subject property called out with the call-out balloons, What I'll call your attention to the zoning map on your left. The crosshatched area is the subject property. This is located in unzoned Baldwin County, so it's neither zoned by the city of Fairhope nor Baldwin County. Some brief information about the property and the property owner. You see Mr. Smith is with us here today as the engineer of record, and you'll notice I'll call to your attention the property size of just under 2 acres. This multiple occupancy project is requesting 16 units. That translates into 8.08 units per acre. As we said, this is in unzoned Baldwin County in County Planning District 17. You'll notice the comments about the community meeting that was held, and the various utility providers are mentioned right there. And Mr. Chairman, if I can pause for just a moment, if we have those watching who are unfamiliar with our terminology, multiple occupancy project is a provision within the City of Fairhope subdivision regulations for developments that are proposing 3 or more units on a single piece of property. So that is why we're reviewing this development per the subdivision regulations and why it is before this body. Commissioners, I'll flip through some drawings very quickly for you, and then we can come back to them to answer any questions at all. We have some drawings of the proposed buildings themselves. You'll see the front elevation here, a first floor plan, and a second floor plan. And this is the civil site plan of the site, again at the northeast intersection of Thompson Hall Road and Twin Beach Road, which is also County Road 44. We have an enlarged site plan here, and then again we can refer back to these for answering any questions. Call to the Planning Commission's attention here. You'll notice we added the statement regarding a traffic study, and that this development does not require a traffic study due to the trip generation. And so we excerpted from the application right there. We can come back to this if we need to. The drainage plan is in compliance with the city's requirements for drainage systems, both in quantity and in quality. You'll notice that we excerpted the chart, that the post-development flows are equal to or less than pre-development, and the total suspended solids removal by the low-impact development techniques is a requirement and is satisfying those provisions of the subdivision regulations. So the staff recommendation is to table for further study for the following reasons. And staff is concerned, though, that the 25% green space required by development of greater than 6 units per acre is submitted. Green space does not sufficiently comply with Table 4-1 within the subdivision regulations. And so just to unfold that, Commissioners, the space for a preserve or trail or a park contemplated the subdivision regulations is not available on this site. Pedestrian area hardscapes or fixtures needed to qualify for a courtyard plaza, a courtyard playground or plaza, those are not included. And then the largest area of green space is large enough to possibly qualify as a green, contains a grass drainage swale, and a portion of the area surrounds a waste facility, which appears to be a compactor dumpster. And what we've done, Commissioners, we can come back to this here, and I've prepared, if it is the pleasure of the Planning Commission to proceed with approval of the case, I've prepared an alternative recommendation that includes the various conditions of approval, which we see a lot on multiple occupancy projects, that allow it to proceed if it is the Planning Commission's pleasure. So we have this on these 2 slides right here we can come back to explain the green space in a bit greater detail. If you'll notice here, we took the civil site plan, overlaid the green space areas, and made them a light green color, and did a great job of laying out the different square footages of the various components of green space. And you can see some of them are a bit disjointed. What I did here is overlaid that same green space on top of the drainage plan. If you notice the northern area, there is a grass line swale going through that area. There's language in the subdivision regulations that in order to use an area that contains drainage facilities, only 30% of that area could be counted. So if you subtract that 30%, it would put that below the green space requirement. And then also, as we talked about earlier, the quality green space issues, because counting smaller green space areas requires facilities. And it may be a little bit difficult to see on screen. This is Table 4-1. This is an excerpt from the subdivision regulations. This was a an amendment to the subdivision regulations that we made about 18 months ago. And this actually borrows from the zoning ordinance, and it goes through the different types of green space depending upon size to count toward a development. And so therefore, therefore, at the staff level, we thought it might be appropriate to bring it forward as a recommendation for tabling so that the engineer of record would have the opportunity to make revisions to possibly bring it into further compliance with the subdivision regulations. Chairman, Commissioners, happy to answer any questions on behalf of staff. And as you say, just for the sake of time, I won't go through the approval recommendation unless we need to, and we can go through it in as great a detail as we need.
Are there any questions for staff at this time? All right. Larry, you want to go ahead and make your presentation?
Yeah, help yourself.
All right, thank you. Thank you all for allowing me to talk. Really just want to kind of go through the whole project and describe the issues that we have with trying to wrap this site into your normal MOP or normal subdivision. The first issue that we have is the highway construction setback. As you can see, we're bordered by Thompson Hall, which I think surprised all of us, is considered a major collector by the Baldwin County. Twin Beach, I understand, but so what that gave us is a setback that was 75 feet from the center line. When we brought that onto the property, that basically end up taking half an acre of the property. Based on my conversations with Buford, it does state in the green space that green space shall not be located adjacent to a collector or arterial street. That's pretty plain and evident. What it doesn't tell us is at what point can we start counting it along a collector or arterial street. In this case, Buford said he thinks if I misspeak for you, Buford, please let me know.
Go right ahead.
I like to misspeak for you, but I don't want to do it in front of you. So. But he said he would be willing to say that if we are outside the highway construction setback, then we could start counting green space. The problem with that, on a corner lot, that takes away half an acre, actually 0.4 acres of this property. Of the 1.9 acres, 0.48 acres is in a highway construction setback. So we're down to 1.5 acres. We start backing out all of the items that are clearly defined, and we end up with 0.56 acres of developable land. We've done that. Now we just have to go through a disagreement on green space, how to calculate what is and what isn't green space. The definitions do not say drainage facilities. It says holding basins. Drainage ditch that's 6 inches deep is not a holding basin. It looks like a lot of contours, but it's because they're all looping contours. The drainage swale at the back of the northeast or northwest building is 6 inches deep. When we get around to where we actually have depth, that's why we cut off in that corner. That's why we stopped calculating green space. We actually had 3-to-1 slopes. We had significant depth, so we stopped calculating green space at that point. On the eastern side of the property. And we didn't calculate the detention pond itself because that is very clear in the ordinance. And so really I want to get some clarification because there is some vague language in how everything is interpreted.
Let me ask one question.
Yeah.
Because, we're getting into the nitty-gritty, and, we did make some changes with this commission here that's very familiar with the changes because they're the commission that made the changes to the green space because as, we have more and more multiple occupancy, and as, the younger generation likes, smaller yards now, even with kids, to, spend more time out in the boat or at soccer fields or what have you. You got to have some place for them to play.
Yeah.
Regardless of the letter of the law, explain to us how this meets the spirit of the law of how this green space is going to work and where they're going to have, recreation opportunities and so forth.
All right, so where I believe we have the spirit of the law is, or the spirit of the rule, is in the back, like I said, we've got, 6 inches going over a span of over 20 feet. That's well in a playable surface of a green. As we round the corner, we have got about a foot of fall difference. And then in between the buildings there, yes, one of them is a trash dumpster enclosure that's fully enclosed, but it's also going to have landscaping around that dumpster enclosure to help shield it from the view of the portion that's green. We've got the highway construction setback. I know that Buford's interpretation is that we've got to stay outside of that when we're collecting it, but when you look at this site, we've got 1.98 acres, and 1.27 acres of that 1.9 acres is landscaping. I mean, that's a tremendous amount of landscaping, whether we call it green space or we don't. We are, almost 2/3 landscaping. It's a very landscape site. That's how I think the spirit of it is met. It is not able to meet most of the requirements of what's in here as far as green space just by the sheer nature of an MOP and this site. We can't be a preserve. We can't be a trail and greenway. We can't be a park by the definitions of these items. We can't be a green because we have to be up on the right-of-way, and we're not allowed to be on the right-of-way. We can't be a plaza because it has to be on the right-of-way, and we can't be on the right-of-way. Courtyard can't be a courtyard because, again, courtyard's got to be on the right-of-way. We can be a playground.
Well, wouldn't you think the access road between all the buildings would be like a right-of-way if you're describing that as part of the definition?
Yeah, we could call that. So we need to build another road that it states we have to be between 2 roads.
Larry, I hear you saying what you can't be and you can't be, but let me, a couple of questions, if I can interrupt you just for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Your grass line swale that you're
Yeah.
referring to,
Yes.
is that a calculated into your drainage equation?
As far as,
Your needed square footage for?
No,
for
sir.
It's an LID though, right?
yes.
Okay, so is it that or is it a playground? Is it open space?
It's open space.
Well-
It's a grass line swell, by y'all's definition, is a low-impact development versus putting it into a hard pipe.
Go back to the other slide.
Which direction?
Nope,
That way?
that was right there.
Yep.
All those little bitty things that are stuck in there?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, come on, really? I got a yard that
Yeah.
only about 2 deer can fit in, and
Yeah.
it's bigger than any of these little spaces. So I mean, come on, it's not even contiguous.
Oh, we
But
can
the-
remove
but
those and
here's
still
here's my point.
meet the green space requirement.
Here's my point.
Yeah.
There was discussion about a request for a variance.
Mm-hmm.
Did you make that?
We did.
Where's the hardship?
The hardship is, well, can I get back to that and
Yeah,
answer?
but let me,
Yeah.
I'm gonna give you some more to think about
Yeah.
while you get back to it. The roadways were here, have already been here.
Yes.
The regulations are in place as it pertains to the setbacks off of those roadways.
Correct.
That means that if it doesn't fit, then you can't be it.
But the roadways were there, then y'all changed the green space requirement.
Well, the roadways are there, but we changed the green space requirements, but then now you come with this piece of property. So, I mean, it's not chicken or the egg. I mean, it was the roads were there.
Yeah.
The green space requirements were in place, and now you come and you're asking for a development on this property.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm not trying to be smart, I'm not trying to be cute, but the reality is, if you can't meet it, then you can't meet it.
But I think we are meeting it. And that's where,
One of the possibilities is eliminate one of your buildings.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, I mean, but anyway, go ahead.
yeah. And that goes to where I wanted to go. One, I want clarification on how the percentage is supposed to be calculated. And it spells out very definitively in there how you calculate the net acreage for calculating the green space, and I have no issues with that. It comes up, but we have to have 25%. But it doesn't tell us what do we do with that 25%. Do we multiply that by the net acreage again to come up with a total green space? That's what would make sense to me, but what staff has told us is we multiply that back by the total acreage, so now we're double dipping.
Which means including the setback.
Including everything we just backed out.
Including the setback.
Yeah, including the setback, including our roads. So we now multiply 25% by 1.98 acres to come up with the 0.50 acres that's required.
Right.
It doesn't say that anywhere in here. It tells us how to come up with a net, and then it doesn't tell us what to multiply the net by. And so that's my biggest
Well, that's
hardship.
a good point.
That's my biggest hardship
I
is we
understand that.
back out everything. And then we're told, okay, now you have to have 25%. Now all that stuff you can't claim, we're going to add that back all in. You can't claim it for green space,
That's right.
but we're going to multiply it by 25%. So
That makes some.
What about
makes
it?
some sense.
Buford?
So, Commissioners, and we touched on it just very, very briefly, but if it's the pleasure of the commission to approve this application, what you'll see is condition of approval 6 or 7 also accepts the request for a waiver from the green space requirements. What I would verbalize and clarify is that obviously that's not a total, in practice, that wouldn't be a total abandonment of all green space. Because we have what staff believes to be a partial satisfaction of the green space requirements before us. And in anticipation of all that, that's why I prepared a recommendation that the Planning Commission could approve if it's their pleasure to do so.
Well, now, wait a minute. So a partial acceptance of the green space requirement? Is that what you're telling me?
Essentially accepting the green space as presented, accepting the green space as presented as a condition of approval, to accept it as is, as a waiver from the requirement.
What
Because
does
it is-
what does that do for us going forward then? Does that set it sounds to me like we're trying to set a precedent then.
Well, Commissioners, I defer to the Commission's judgment on this. I mean, staff has presented it as we review it and as we feel. It is staff's recommendation and staff's belief at the review that we don't have full compliance with all of the green space required. This is a bit of a challenging site because it's complicated. There's several things involved. You have 16 units on just under 2 acres. You have drainage. You have on-site detention. You have 75-foot construction setbacks imposed by the Baldwin County Highway Department on 2 roads. Certainly understand that. But we reviewed it against the subdivision regulations that we have in place now with the green space requirements that were implemented about a year ago.
And
The only-
real quick, and I understand Larry's, figuring out what some of this is and some of our regulations can be tricky because every project's different. But this board has, and the council has empowered us to interpret that. So what Buford's interpretation is, by the way of that requirement and the way you calculate that, is his interpretation. There is a recourse for that, and in the subdivision regulations, I could be wrong, but I think that's going to court, the circuit court, to argue that
Yeah,
interpretation.
but I think we need to understand, though, before we get to that point, is, I mean, there's some areas of this stuff is very clear cut. And hopefully when we make these green space ordinances, everything is real clear cut. I think we've got one question here, and the only question I see is if we've got, 2 roads that we're not able to count the green space on because, there's setbacks that might actually be paved, and how in the world can we count that? I agree. Buford 100% there. If in 10 years from now, never say never again, always tell everybody that my dad used to go, you know, snake hunting where Bel Air Mall is now. And, you know, that was considered a rural area when he was young. And it's obviously not now. But if we're not gonna count any of that land in the green space, is it then fair to count that land in the overall amount of land toward the green space? Because to me, that's kind of double dipping. On the one hand, we're saying, you know, hey, this green space doesn't count. But on the other hand, we're saying, I mean, to me, it's like you almost need to go one way or the other of just taking all that land out and say, hey, at some point, that's going to be dirt. I mean, that's not going to be dirt, that's going to be asphalt. Therefore, we're not counting it as green space, but also at some point, that land's going to be taken from them. So we're not going to calculate it in the green space overall percentage of how much green space they have to have.
Right. And that's the struggle. But you also can consider that may be the way it is for 30 years, 50 years without being taken.
Then it'll be green.
And then, yeah.
Well, but the reality is, whether it's
But it won't be improved.
green space or it's drainage, you're not gonna put a retention pond in a setback.
We can't, we're not allowed to.
Well, you can't, and
Right.
we're not gonna allow, it wouldn't be allowed anyway. It's not allowed in the county, it's not allowed here.
Yeah.
But for the simple reason that if they do expand the highway or the road, you don't have a retention pond anymore. So,
Mr. Chairman,
the
if I
same
may?
is true with green space.
Chairman, Commissioners, we faced a similar situation on Twin Beach Estates, which is just east.
We allowed some of that, didn't we?
Yes, sir. That's why I wanted to explain what happened there, because though a much larger site and a major subdivision, as far as the highway construction setback is concerned, the application there was the same as it is here. So no green space was shown within that highway construction setback on that development. So for consistency's sake, the interpretation is the same here. That's a much larger site, obviously.
We did count the 6-inch swell that they had on Twin Beach Estates toward green space, didn't we?
Yes, sir. And we didn't have, that was reviewed against the subdivision regulations that were in place in early 2018, before we put in the enhanced green space requirements. If we were evaluating this site per that version of the subdivision regulations, we wouldn't be having this discussion at all about green space, because MOPs did not require green space at all in that era. So you're correct. You're absolutely correct. But a year removed from that, the subdivision regulations changed, and a year removed from that, we're here tonight reviewing this case. So all correct, all correct and valid.
The ticket has got to be consistency.
Yeah.
With whatever we're gonna do, it's got to be consistent. And you can't say, well, we're gonna give a little bit here, because then a little bit here means where do you stop? There is no stopping point.
Well, that's the whole reason why we wrote these new subdivision regulations, is for this exact reason. So if we're going to make a judgment on giving someone a grandfathering in or a variance here, then we have no consistency. So, and I have all faith that you make great developments, and I think maybe we just need to put a little more time and thought into something different.
Okay.
Yeah.
And on the consistency part, I mean, I think Buford just made the consistency argument when he explained that that other one was reviewed against a whole different set of regulations. We're now presenting you, and whether we table this and, you know, move forward, or if we go down the waiver or what, we still need this. We need my question answered so that we know how to move forward, because I don't think it was the
What
intent.
specific question is that?
That is how to calculate the required green space once you get that 25%. Do you multiply that by the net acreage, or do you multiply it by the property's entire acreage? And because that part's not defined, it takes us all the way to calculating the net acreage, and then it drops us and just says you have 25% green space. But I don't think it was the intent to double dip and say we've got to back all this area out that can't be utilized, but then we're going to make you turn around. Because if you start doing the math, I've got 0.48 acres of of highway construction setback. We have .27 acres of pond. We have .2 acres of road. I mean, we're down to .56 acres left when we do all the numbers of land. If we multiply that 25% by the 2 acres, I think it should be multiplied by the net acreage. And not just for my sake, but for all projects, I think that ain't what y'all's intent was when y'all approved this. I think that needs to be clarified so that everybody is consistent moving forward.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And I think if, this takes a little bit more study, because what we want to do is look at other cases and how this applies.
I go back to my original thought that we should table this for 30 days and, talk with Ken as far as, is that, because I totally get that one point. Not that I think, like this overall that much anyway, because I don't see a lot of usable green space on an item with 16, people, but I don't know what age people or what the demographic is. If it's old folks, maybe it's fine. If it's a bunch of kids, not much space there. But regardless, I suggest now that we know the issue, that we, put this for 30 days and we'll try to work out an answer for that so that we're consistent going forward.
Do you need a motion for that? Do we need a motion for the table it?
Public hearing.
Okay, I'll go to.
Did we
No.
open a public hearing?
No, we
Well,
haven't.
then if the developer at its option may elect to have it held over or withdraw it for reconsideration next month, then you won't need a motion to table that.
I'd like to hold it over for next month so we can continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry.
And, thank you very much. And Jesse Bird is in the audience and signed up to speak to this. So,
They left.
they did, okay. So I'm gonna save somebody. That'll be next month for anybody interested to talk to us. All right. Next item on the agenda is SD subdivision 20.08, public hearing to consider the request of 24/7 Development Partners of Alabama LLC for a preliminary plat approval of a 15-lot subdivision.
Good evening again. As you said, it's 20.08, it's a 15-lot major subdivision. This is a request of Dewberry Engineers on behalf of 24/7 Development Partners of Alabama, who's the owner and applicant for preliminary plat approval of Summer Lane subdivision, a 15-lot major subdivision. It's located at the east terminus of Summer Lane and on the west side of South Section Street. Subject property is 5.22 acres. The smallest lot is 5,430 square feet, the largest lot being 16,065 square feet. And the subdivision will have access from South Section Street and Summer Lane. This was a recently approved planned unit development. The zoning map on the left has not been changed to reflect the zoning change to a planned unit development. It is right across from the Public Works building. On the right is the aerial of the property. This is a screenshot of the approved, or a screenshot of the preliminary plat. Some of the data that we have to go along with this, as I said, it's zoned a PUD. It's approximately 5.2 acres with 15 lots. Has a front setback of 20 feet, rear 16 feet, and side of 8 feet. It is serviced by City of Fairhope Water, Sewer, Electric, and the telephone service is by AT&T. The proposed subdivision has been reviewed according to Fairhope subdivision regulations, and with it being a planned unit development, has an approved site plan that the subdivision had to be reviewed against as well, and the proposed subdivision has been designed in accordance with both. A community meeting was held, and the minutes reflect that the proposed project and the process for approval was discussed. The site has 3 different LID techniques, a vegetated grass buffer, infiltration trench, and grass swell with our TSS removals there. The entire developed site drainage area will be directed to the pond, which contains the infiltration trench. Therefore, the weighted average for the TSS removal will be 80%. It will actually be greater than that of the net removal. Subdivision is consistent with its regulations. There were a few notes that needed to be changed on the plat itself. The staff recommends approval of SD 20.08 Summer Lane subdivision with the following conditions. That a note be added to reflect the fence restrictions per the approved PUD ordinance 1661. Add lot coverage for principal structure and accessory structure per the approved ordinance. at a maximum building height per the approved ordinance, at a minimum structure separation between the primary and accessory structure per the approved ordinance, adding note that all lots shall be accessed from the rear alley, and the final note is to add the finished floor elevations to the plat for each lot. And most of those notes are codified in the approved PUD that was approved, and just to have those reflected on the actual plat itself will help save a little bit of work in the future. If somebody is going to build a house or looking to see what was approved, it'll prevent them from having to dig up the entire ordinance, and it'll be on the actual plat that gets recorded. Staff is happy to answer any questions that you may have. And I believe Ms. Casey Hill is here with us on behalf of Dewberry and can answer any questions as well.
Any questions for staff?
Nope.
In that case, I'll go ahead and open the public hearing first, if that's okay, and then, do you have anything you want to add before the public hearing? If not, I'll open the public hearing and then call you up once to answer any questions that we might get in that case. In that case, I'm opening the public hearing. I've got one name listed here. I can't read the first name. Noland is the last name. I'm sorry?
Wayne Noland.
Okay.
Juanie.
Give your address also for the record. Thank you.
I have property at 11 Pope Court. It's located on the southwest corner of the proposed Summer Lane subdivision. My house is near the property line, approximately 50 feet from it. I have 3 questions about the proposed subdivision road or alleyway that is near that property line. That is the road or alleyway that encircles the subdivision. Number 1, how far from the property line between my property and the subdivision will the road or alleyway be? Should I wait for answers to that or go on with the others?
Go on with the others.
Okay.
I'm writing these down. for-
Number 2, how wide is that road or alleyway? 3, what will the road be used for? In other words, is it possible for a car, a garbage truck, any kind of vehicle to encircle the subdivision on that road or alleyway? And a final question, not about the road, is what are the rules about fence construction? In other words, if I choose to put up a high fence between my property and the subdivision, are there any rules, regulations, policies regarding that? And that's all.
Okay, as far as if you're talking about you're building a fence, are you you're not in a subdivision or any gated community, so
That's a Echo Bridge, Bridge Estates.
Covered bridge.
Covered bridge.
Uh-huh.
and unless you've got subdivision regs
There's none.
pertaining to
The
yours.
the
8
zoning
feet.
ordinance would require a minimum of 8 feet behind the rear, a maximum of 8 feet behind the rear building line of our house.
And 4
Say it
feet in
again,
front.
Mike.
Their per property is zoned, so therefore the zoning ordinance says that the fence can be a maximum of 8 feet.
Right.
If it's located behind the rear building line behind the front building line of the house, anything forward of your front building line can be a maximum of 4 feet.
You
Okay, I'm not quite understanding that.
Basically, you would just go to the city of Fairhope, you just need to check, and whoever whoever you hire to build a fence, or if you're gonna build it yourself, you just go to the building department, and they'll let you know. But he's saying basically in your backyard, you could build an 8-foot fence, is just what he's saying off the cuff, but you need to research that exactly.
Okay, so it cannot be higher than 8 feet, am I understanding?
That's correct.
Okay, okay. Any other questions?
We'll go ahead and we'll ask those other 3 questions.
The plat says 16-foot alleyway.
Okay,
It's
so,
16 feet wide.
okay, does this mean that cars can?
Yeah, well, we're gonna bring the engineer up and ask those questions, because, I can look at the plat, but I'd rather the engineer answer
Okay.
those to get it on the record.
So, thank you very much.
That way, if something's wrong, we won't say that I misled you, it'll be someone else.
Right. Well, I think you can understand that a homeowner that close to that alleyway would not wish to have that be a kind of thoroughfare going in the back of your property, right? Just,
Certainly.
sure you can understand that. Thank
Do
you.
you, Mike, can you put the plat back up there so that they can see it, please?
All right. Would anybody else like to speak to this item? This is just right across from the City Warehouse area, 15-lot subdivision on South Section Street. If not, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and ask our representative to come up. If y'all don't mind, if you have a question, I can reopen the public hearing and you can ask on the record. But we need
She's
to
actually
keep-
our client.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
We need to keep things on the record. I'm sorry. That's fine, excuse me.
So regarding the three questions that were posed, the approximate distance from the property line to the alleyway is 15 feet, but the right-of-way itself is 1 foot from the edge of the right-of-way. So the distance from the property line to the alley, like paved roadway, is 16 feet. Does that make sense? Are you following me? The alley as a
Edge of
whole-
pavement.
Edge of pavement,
Edge of
correct.
pavement,
Thank you. Right
Now, are you
phrase.
talking about at the closest point?
So it's a 16-foot wide alley, but it's a 14-foot wide, like, pavement.
Travel
You
lane.
might, he's the engineer.
I understand,
The
but
phrasing
when
is-
you're talking about the space between the alley and the property line, you know, right where lots 11 and 12 come together, it looks to be very close.
That is an older version. I apologize.
The closest point to the property line is 16 feet.
Okay. So this that we're looking at is not the actual drawing?
The one on the screen, the one on the screen is not the newest.
This is the one this is it here, right? Come on. Isn't that it? Okay.
Okay.
Do you have this one, Mike? Do you have this one on the board? Want me to hold it up?
Well, still
There's two on
going back,
Go
they're fairly
back.
similar,
There
but
might be another
still,
one.
either way, my point is the same.
The other way.
That between lots 11 and 12,
We're at the beginning.
I don't know which way to go. Okay.
We're at next
my
month's
my
meeting.
point is either way, between lots 11 and 12, if that's 16 feet, when you get over to Miss Nolan's property, you know, it looks like it's probably double that to, 10 times that. And, that she's much further the way that, round circle goes into a pie shape.
Do y'all see Ms. Nolan's property on the plat?
Her property is.
Right in the corner,
Right in the corner,
15,
right there. There you go.
right there.
by, kind of lot 13,
Like-
so.
A huge.
I apologize.
distance.
I was just describing the distance here.
Right,
At a
I'm just saying, it
minimum.
looks like hers would be 40 to,
16
100 feet, depending on where you measure.
To there,
Understand.
yeah.
16 feet.
Um,
and then-
Okay, and the width of the alley is 16 feet?
Yes, with 14-foot paved.
And what is the purpose of that
70 feet, right?
Yeah.
rear alley? What would that
I would
be
be
used
worried if I
for?
was here.
Oh, that's access to the lots.
The
Okay.
garages are
Right.
in the
Is-
back.
That's right.
If I may, the approved PUD, when we went through that, part of the PUD was having a center area for guests to park.
Right.
The alley is for the access for all of the lots. Hence, one of the conditions of approval was that all lots shall be accessed via the rear alley. That is for the residents of this development to get to their garages, to get inside of their house. That center area is more of a greenway that is going to have guest parking spaces around the center of that.
What about garbage trucks and service trucks?
They would be going through the middle, not around.
They won't be using the back alley.
As, at this point, I do not believe so.
I thought the last time they said the garbage trucks would use the back alley. And because the center was gonna be like some type of, they wanted stone or something. It was something wonky.
Going to be a crushed aggregate
Yeah.
of some sort.
And they were gonna use the outer ring as where the garbage trucks and all that stuff would go in. I remember this one, and it was,
Well, if the garages are in the back, then
The trash
your
would be-
trash all the way up to the front.
that would make no sense.
Then I think is
What's the question?
They were just asking whether the garbage trucks would access from the front or the rear.
Initially, we proposed it to be gravel with the garbage trucks going around the rear, but we changed it to asphalt for the purposes of the garbage truck. So as of right now, the garbage is planned around the rear of the lots.
Okay. Thank you. Any more questions while the developer's up? Thank you very much. In that case, I'll go ahead and turn the meeting back over to the commissioners. Any further questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
That lot.
Yeah. Public hearing's been closed.
Motion, Mr. Chairman. SD 20.08 Summer Lane subdivision. I move we approve subject to staff recommendations.
I've got a motion to approve subject to staff recommendations. Do I have a second?
Say, oh.
I've got a second.
How many?
Councilman Boone, got that? All right, any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay.
He had a question.
All right, motion passes unanimously. We've got, just one second, we've got,
He was right.
yes, sir.
I just like to ask if you can turn the volume up in the back. I took the photo. We can't hear you.
Be glad to.
Thank you very much.
All right, we've got old and new business. We've got our 2020 scheduled deadlines, and then we'll close this meeting and have our public participation. But I thought we already did our agenda and deadlines. Is this deja vu all over again?
We did, Chairman. There is actually a conflict with the November Planning Commission meeting. That is required to be the first city council meeting for the organizational, I guess, for the new city council that gets elected this year. So we're requesting to move it from November 2nd to Thursday, November 5th, so that we don't have a conflict with the city council meeting.
Okay. Does that need to be a motion or just?
So moved.
Have a second? Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, done. Beaufort Family Subdivisions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. And revisiting this topic, and you'll notice the first couple of slides right here is what you've seen before. These are documents from Baldwin County from their family subdivision process, and we won't revisit that for the following reason. And I think I'll in his absence, I'll thank Ken Watson for his assistance with helping me vet this. We have been using the term family subdivision incorrectly. That is strictly a county, that is strictly a provision allowed in the various codes of the state of Alabama for counties. So it's actually an improper terminology for a city planning commission. And again, I'm greatly oversimplifying the subject matter here. But we may refer to that process informally, but it's not a subdivision process we can contemplate formally. Therefore, what I would like to do, Commissioners, is at a future date, I'd like to revisit this topic, but would use correct terminology that is unique to and allowable within a city planning commission. And so what I have on screen, just to call to your attention, so that way you can read it on your own, Article 5, Section D, lowercase c, in the subdivision regulations, as written right now, contemplates a rural subdivision. And you'll see in the slide, I've put the entire requirement. It goes over to 2 slides, as you can see right there. But I'll call your attention to what I have in bold. 1, the subdivision must be entirely outside of the city limits. The total area of the subdivision, not the individual lots, must be greater than 20 acres. If you'll go down to item 5, all lots within the subdivision shall be a minimum of 5 acres. This is existing within the subdivision regulations right now, and I questioned Emily about it, and she said to her recollection, in more than 14 years of working for the city, only once has someone specifically requested this process, and it was a subdivision that never went to final plat. I believe there's a possibility that this may assist some of our citizens who are in the planning jurisdiction but have larger properties, and this may be a way to assist them as a version of a minor subdivision that we could compile without drastically revising or amending the subdivision regulations. I'll also, Commissioners, call your attention to this slide. And you notice items 1 through 8 are the provisions of a rural subdivision. You'll notice then item D, an agricultural subdivision. And you'll notice there's very few requirements other than that the lots shall be a minimum of 20 acres. Commissioners, this may be as simple as we simply add a checkbox to the existing application that we have right now requesting this process. But I think there's a possibility that we may be able to modernize these regulations, because I think what we anticipate is a subdivision that requires minimal review, that other than staff covering our costs, that it's a matter of compiling the subdivision, writing a recommendation for approval, and bringing it before this planning commission, possibly at a lower cost than a minor subdivision, which is $1,000. The cost of that, we'd have to review that with the city council because they set the costs. But this is a possibility, and I just wanted to publicly make this suggestion to the planning commission and bring this back to the planning commission at a future meeting with a draft consideration. This allows us to operate within the subdivision regulations as they exist now without having to create an entirely new process. And with that, Commissioners, I have one more thing I want to speak on a different subject, segueing into this from this, but I'll pause here for a moment to answer any questions.
What is the name that you and Ken came up with if it's not a family subdivision?
It would be either a rural subdivision, as you see in Article 5, Section DC, or an agricultural subdivision, Article 5, capital D, lowercase d. And so the applicant would ask for a rural or an agricultural subdivision. So if they had greater than 20 acres and wanted to subdivide into lots that were at least 5 acres.
What if they had 7 kids?
Well, it would depend upon the parent parcel size, but at least
What if they had 20 acres and they had 7 kids?
Well, again, we're getting out of the family subdivision. We're just saying.
Well, I know, but
yes, sir.
the objective of a family subdivision is to allow a division within a closely held family.
And so, Commissioners, that's a fantastic point. Appreciate Commissioner Dice bringing that up. This would not necessarily, there would be no review or vetting about the family members. This would be for the benefit of whomever it benefits. But I think the sheer size of the lots makes the review process much simpler, where it would not require a great deal of staff time to prepare, and that possibly that could be accomplished at a lower cost.
Okay, so well, let me understand. You confused me now. So this is not as I knew it in the county as a family subdivision. There was also an exempt subdivision within the county, and it was 20 acres or more.
This would not be an exempt subdivision, so a county exempt subdivision really is not a subdivision per se. It is an allowance that the citizen can, without going through the subdivision process and without going before the county's planning commission, essentially go and record a new deed.
Well, that went out a few years ago anyway, but it is coming back in the county.
That's a power that the state gives counties and not the cities, so that's part of our limitation there.
Okay, so it's not an exempt subdivision, it's not a family subdivision, it's just a
large lot subdivision.
large lot subdivision that
And
you guys are gonna take.
yes, sir, we'll vet this, but I wanted to make certain that this is not by any means a closed matter and that we're not abandoning this or giving up. I think we're trying to more wisely utilize the regulatory authority that we do have as a city and the regulations that we currently have in place.
Okay.
And Commissioners, one more statement, and this is a good segue into this. I just wanted to publicly state this. To the various applications that we have, with the number of applications that we review at the staff level, the complexity of the applications that we receive, as we saw today on some cases. Just wanted to publicly state this so we'd have it preserved in the public record to refer back to. One difficulty we're experiencing is that applications are coming in late and they're coming in incomplete. and just wanted to publicly assert and memorialize that staff will be enforcing deadlines, both for initial applications and also for follow-up information that we require. During the review process, we have to set deadlines, and that applications need to be submitted on time as directed by staff, and they need to be complete. And I just wanted to indulge a few moments of your time to mention that publicly, and I appreciate your time, Commissioners. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Buford. All right, are you going to discuss the Gwinnett Road
Yes, we are.
corridor overlay? Thank you, sir.
And I'm seeing some of the same people that were here a couple of weeks ago, so apologize. You're going to get a redo. But that was kind of the point of having that day meeting. We got some complaints that some people weren't able to make the evening meetings on Monday night, so introducing these concepts a little incrementally. So I will, since I do see a lot of the same faces, I will kind of go through this a little quicker and then get to, I think, what the meat tonight is, where the questions we received from 2 weeks ago, and kind of answer some of those and provide a little more clarity on those questions that were raised. This is kind of the new language broken out. So, and I want to be clear because a lot of these questions were, what about this? You can take the previous revisions or previous proposal and set it aside, where we don't have anything that, just forget that one. Let's focus here because this is our new proposal. Some of those things may creep into that in components. Be very clear that that's our intent, you know, with some of the restrictions on drive-throughs or something like that. Will come in the next one, but we are introducing a new boundaries of the districts and some new frontage types and how buildings are sited on property. So I want to be clear on what that is before we move to the next step. Applicability was a big conversation we had. This is the districts will be the boundary. And I want to also be clear on when you see the map and people see that map and you see boundaries that extend past our city limits, that is by design and really for the property owner's benefit. Some of those, and we're very clear and hopefully clarified that even more, that the restrictions in this district, if approved, does not apply to them. But the boundary's there so that if they do want to annex in, they don't have to wait and amend the boundaries, because that would be a process where any map edit has to go through council to amend that overlay district boundary, and then they would have to come back through the process of annexation and those things. So in what now is a little bit of a belabored process of maybe 6 weeks to 8 weeks would turn into 3 months to 4 months. So that's why that's there. But this was a very good question we received, and this was me writing it. I said 2 weeks ago, hasn't been vetted by attorneys. So basically, the original language was sites outside of the city of Fairhope's municipal jurisdiction are exempt from the requirements of this section. The revision we've made, we've looked in the state statute. Sites outside of the city of Fairhope's municipal corporate boundary, commonly known as the city limits, are exempt from the requirements of this section. Y'all know and I know we've never, that intent was always the same, but clarifying that so everyone can agree what it is was, I think, important. Single family residentially zoned properties are exempt from the requirements of the section. Property zone RA are exempt from the requirements of the section. Now, this was a big one where I think different sections kind of played together and caused some unintended consequences in the previous version. So we've clarified this in a way I think is a little more applicable. We know the intent here was a lot of the new construction. You've seen the gaps that was historically been residential rezoned to commercial properties. And we haven't been able to address that. Since 1954, that was kind of what all of our land use plans said, and now we kind of have this more corridor planning. So the intent of a lot of this is what happens with those new properties. Now, anytime you do something like this, there's the courts say you have a uniformity clause. You've got to treat everybody in that the same way. So by its nature, it impacts people, current businesses and current property owners, where maybe that wasn't the intent. And we had some pretty harsh language if you look at that as the strictest sense of the law. So basically, we've taken all that out. And for existing property owners, if they expand their buildings and structures by more than 50% of the square footage, very clear on what that is, if they don't do that, they don't never trigger that, then they're exempt from the requirements of this section. So there's a big threshold there. We've looked, and it's hard to determine that because people can absorb land next to them and do that. But as it sits right now, there's really very few that even have that option. Properties that have that option to even expand that much without acquiring more land that are within our city limits and applicable under this. Then we also talked about non-conforming uses and what happens there. And if it's, a building sits empty right now, anything that's a non-conforming use, 180 days, if that sits vacant, then that use goes away. So if we said no drive-throughs and a business with a drive-through sits empty 180 days, well, they can't use that drive-through anymore by the letter of the law. We've expanded that to 365. And we're not getting into uses yet, but I do want to say we're not going to have the prohibited word as much, in the next, what you'll see, the next meeting we have. It's a little bit more kind of like the way we've done things in our underlying zoning and medical overlay district where there's just certain restrictions. For a drive-through, you've got to be able to contain that traffic on your site and, it's visually maybe screened or some of those things, but so we're hitting this on two angles. You're seeing one now. We're doubling the length of time someone has while it sits empty. This section just says if overlapping regulations appear, this takes precedent. In existing PUDs shall be exempt unless they didn't commit to anything the way buildings are cited, because that's what we're doing here. We're citing buildings. So if someone has a blank PUD and just carved out big chunks of property, then this might apply. But if in a PUD like we asked for, where it's all planned comprehensively and they have the buildings, that's kind of exempt from this, is what this section is saying. And this does not override, it adds to and takes away in some cases, being completely honest, the underlying base zoning, but they don't go away. There's still a lot of things governed by underlying zoning. Now, a regulating plan, and this also goes back to what we're actually doing and where we're doing it. Not just the definition, but there will be a regulating plan that goes along with the ordinance and where the boundary is, and it's clear where that is. We have moved from a concept of 5 distinct villages concepts to 3 districts that are follow out concentrically from improved intersections. So the closer you are to the traffic signal intersection, there's a core district, and then as you move out, buffer district, and then further out in the transitional districts. And we'll kind of look at, this may be a little, there's different ways to site a building. And that's what we're going to look at individually, but this is the chart that says where and when you can do that. So within the core district, and we've actually added, based on some of the comments, the landscape screen. So where the previous version of the overlay district, you had one option to site your building. In this, there's at least 3 options, and in some cases 5. So, and we're just talking about how the building is sited, and we'll move into those different options. And it's really about the front of the building, what the front of the building is, where it's placed. So, core district near the traffic signalized intersection, you have what closely mimics one of the spaces, one of the options in the previous version. And this is a green space buffer. We proposed 5 feet, but I think one of the comments made a lot of sense, and we have required trees, overstory trees, and we might need a little more room for that. So giving the option of where they want a sidewalk and giving some more flexibility there. But what this does is bring the building up to the front, closer to our traffic intersections. Back up one, core, that's core, and then moving to the buffer, you get, what is actually happening here, the building's moving back a little bit as we get further away, and a little bit more flexible open space. The green space buffer is reduced a little bit from what, everything on Greeno right now is 20 feet. So reducing this to 10 feet and creating a little more flexible open space, and we can define that. And then the third option in the standard versions are transitional district. And this is pretty much what's there now, but instead of a building setback that's dependent on underlying zoning, maybe 35 feet, 40 feet, this has a build to area. So you've still got the 20-foot green space buffer, and then you build within a 10-foot. There's still flexibility there to kind of move around within that 10-foot, add architectural details, just more flexibility. So the change is about 20 feet where the front of the building's sited. And one of the reasons that's beneficial, because I'm going to come touch back to this, is parking. You know, there's some that parking should be in the front. Well, we're kind of saying parking should be to the side and the rear. That's one of the main tenets of this. Well, by allowing them to build the front or closer to the road, you're actually also allowing that side parking to be closer. So they kind of are hand in hand, work hand in hand. And then there's other additional options that people can choose from. Outdoor sales, dining area. This is allowed in, I think, all 3 districts. Example, and I keep using Cecil, and he's one day going to hit me, but this is Old Time Feed, and this was brought up before. This is an example of what we're talking about here, because this, in essence, is showing some of the parking in the front, because you've got 20 feet, your outdoor sales area, can't do it in that 20-foot area, but then right at the front of the facade is where your parking can start. So you are moving that to the front. It's just how the building sits and what that aesthetic is on at the front of the road. Landscape screened. You know, there's a few examples of this up and down Greeno. It's really kind of amazing how many there are when you start looking at it. But if they're going to screen the building, what do we care really what it looks like? I mean, one of the things that I think distinguishes Greeno from a lot of other commercial strips is the landscape there. You know, you kind of drive through and you have this ebb and flow of, there's woods, there's a commercial area. You know, this is an option. If you know, I think there's a lot of opportunities for this and gives people a little more flexibility. This one's just outside of our city limits, but it was a great example how 2-story apartment buildings are screened. You don't even know they're there, just by strategic planting of trees and some green space area. This is just south of the high school, adjacent to the high school, actually. But now I've actually seen some of these examples within the city too. So, and then internal circulation. A lot of the comments from the moment this was first presented was about drive-throughs and how to handle those. And you know, we prohibited that, I think, in 4 of the 5 zones in the previous version. So if we've got a way, you know, it was very clear that that's wanted, but how does it? We also don't want to turn into, I've heard Airport Boulevard, Hamburger Hill, all of those things. So how do we accomplish both things? And I think looking at some good examples of what we have now led to this. So you have a green space buffer. You have a way to have a drive within the site that allows internal circulation, because that's the key to what it is. We don't want to send some in one side and then send them straight out on the road, because if they go through and, that line I forgot something, well, then they got to get back on our roads and then stress the traffic pattern. So this is an option there. There's a good example. It's hard to see into the trees right here, but that's the equivalent of the drive lane that's we're providing option for. But then you can see everything here almost, I mean, it matches. The parking's to the rear of the front facade. They've got plenty of parking. Their internal circulation is great. They've actually got 3 drive-through lanes here. So it can happen and be tasteful and still look good and not cause traffic problems. This also has a connection to the multi-use path. It's front-facing, but they access it from all 3 sides of the building. And then also the park front. Basically, if you want to maintain lawn out front, and the city's got some properties where the high school this falls in. Give some capabilities of parking in this area because you're really pushing back, but not just become a parking lot. So high school's the example there. That's a kind of a maintained lawn. This might not fit for every, but it's an option. And that's 100 foot where the high school is using much greater area than that. Now kind of going into some of the questions from the meeting and answering those. A lot of the things, and we're seeing this over and over and over again. A lot of the questions, a lot of the misconceptions. This is not about a lot of the conversations that happen. It's not about annexations. It's not about family subdivisions, extraterritorial issues, sign ordinance, taxes, and especially the language that was in the old version. That was one of the things we kept having to explain. This is starting from scratch. We're starting this incrementally so there can be no confusion on what we're going to do or what we're proposing. Jumping into those questions, I'll just kind of read through them, rough up the steps and cost to convert from undesirable to desirable for several different types of landowners. As you can see by my one sentence answer, I didn't do that. I think this is looking at the former version because what we're intended to do here is not make this an issue for existing businesses. That's very few options would they be increasing their square footage by 50%. And then even if they do, it's building to the less conforming side. So building to the road would be the option. So I don't think there is a cost to many of the businesses to make this happen. We're excluding them from those requirements in most cases. Provide illustrations of what is aesthetically agreeable and what isn't. Again, I'm kind of wondering if this is tying to, there's some fears of form-based code and we're going to make people pick what colors of paint they're going to use and those sort of things. That's not the intent, and what little bit we're going to deal with on buildings will be in the next phase. Right now it's about siding, and we provided examples of those. We will post this on a website and it'll be a PDF, so that's why they're shown as Appendix A, but that's the images we just looked at. Parking needs to be in the front, touched on that a little bit, and I am sympathetic to business owners. There's a commonality, no matter where you go, every business owner needs more parking and more signage. That's very clear. And it's a balance on what we do to get there. But if everybody has a big parking lot up front so everybody can see the business, you see what that looks like in pretty much every town you go to. There's no identity to any of those. And you can keep looking through Google Maps and just drop it and challenge yourself. Go to some place on Google Maps, find the town, and find where a McDonald's and a Hardee's or Arby's or something like that is and drop down into Street View. It's going to look like this 90% of the time. And if that's what we want, that's it. But what we're trying to do here is something aesthetic. These are all pretty close. One's around Pensacola, Airport Boulevard, since we like that one. Greenville, just up the road a little ways, and Vestavia. So that's just some examples of what we get when parking becomes our guideline and our goal, if we're designing around parking. What would be the consequences of different ways of not doing it? This is a part of the zoning code, so it's kind of anything that applies right now. A lot of these things are, right now, if someone came in and didn't meet zoning code and we called that to their attention and they're in the middle of construction, well, we hold a CO. They can't get their certificate of occupancy until they remedy that. So, it's kind of a case by case on how that happens. So if there's any way we need to clarify this, we'll be happy to. I'm not sure exactly where that one was coming from, but I'll be happy to clarify that any more if we need to. Question was, how much public right-of-way and green space exists in each district? A right-of-way it varies a little bit throughout the district, and then even within the right-of-way, your center of road can kind of vary a little bit. But on average, there's between 40 and 50 feet of green space within the right-of-way. And all new construction, at least recently, has 20 feet of green space on private property. We've got some before the tree ordinance in 2007, was that adopted? Forgive me on the year, but since that's been adopted, prior to that, you might not have had that 20 feet on private
I think
property.
the update was in, correct me if I'm wrong, Emily, the most recent update was in 2015?
So whenever that 20-foot green space buffer was implemented, before that, you might not have that 20 feet. I pulled that Vestavia in there for an example because it was pretty barren. You see asphalt, and there was actually a lot of, the city had taken the responsibility of putting trees in the right of way, and it was really gorgeous, and they had the dogwoods and all mix of trees. It was gorgeous coming right off the intersection. But AlDOT, State Road, they're going to fix a traffic flow problem. And sometimes they do that by just creating more lanes. So if we rely on every bit of tree and all that to be on right-of-way property, and eventually you can see what Greeno's done through the years. I mean, I've heard awesome stories about how it was a dirt road and now what it is. It's going to keep evolving. So at some point, if we don't have that and don't think about that now, it might be a problem. I've mentioned this before, 5-foot green space seems too tall for mature street trees. I think we can increase that without really having an impact. Pedestrian safety at intersections, absolutely important, something we should consider, but it's just beyond the scope. And I want to be clear on what we're limiting this overlay to. That's not something we want to, can really wrap up within this project. Where for design standards can be used. I think I'm answering this one right, and it's just bringing back the table. When I copied and pasted into PowerPoint, it kind of tweaked it. So this is actually the version that's in the PDF we put online, a little more legible, and we did amend that a little bit. So each property owner has at least 3 options on how the building can be sited, and what that it looks like. So I think there's a lot more flexibility from the previously proposed that accommodates most things. Most of I think everything we've looked at, and by people coming to talk to us, there's an option in here that works with it. So I think we actually accomplished something pretty amazing there. Can we require graphic or tactile pedestrian crossing pavement markings where sidewalks and multi-use trail intersect drive crossings? So ingress, egress off of Greeno. We'll be happy to consider this. I don't think it's something we can do in an overlay district, and I'm not sure if it's something we can require now. We don't do that now on projects. We did talk to Richard Johnson this afternoon, and we're not requiring that right now. So, but we'll dig into that a little deeper and see if that's something that can be done. Can we re-engineer Greeno like Gulf Shores? Safe, real pedestrian crossings. Again, this is beyond the scope of this overlay district. But just an FYI, this is going to be partnerships with AlDOT a lot of times. In fact, some of those are already in the works, some intersection improvements. So keep an eye out for those, but not something we can really address with this tool. Who wants this and who's pushing it? We've answered this before, but this has been discussed since 1987. Buford put a timeline on months ago on every conversation that's been had. So please take a look at that. We put a link here, and we'll post this online as well. But it's the duty of our department to propose solutions to all these growth-related issues. It's an evolution. If you need to hang, that can be, we're the culprit. That's our jobs. It's planning commission and council that will vote on those solutions. So when I talk about what we're going to do next, I want everybody to be clear. The schedule on this, and you will see a little bit of a rush when I ask you to meet again before the next meeting. You're going to see a rush, and that's due to some advertising restrictions and it getting to council. But we're rushing to get to something that can be debated on. And a kind of a final, that's where the rush is. But March 11 is our deadline. March 11 is when we have to advertise a final version. It can't be amended after that. Before it to get to the council to be able to vote on it on April 27th.
13th.
That would be the first one.
here.
But vote on it actually the 27th. So that's the rush you're going to see until March 11th. But then there's a month and 6 weeks almost to, if you don't like it, and go to council, and, tell them what that final version is. So if people can have patience and work with us through this process to understand it and give us valuable criticism, we're going to propose something. That's a given. So between now and March 11th, if we can work toward, and actually I think it's going to be March 3rd when the next meeting of this commission. And then if it's just say no to it, there'll be 6 months to do that. But I want to be clear on what that is. So when we're seeing this rushing, it's not a broad rushing to get this through and shove it down anyone's throat. We've got some deadlines on what we have to do legally for advertisements. So that's it for tonight. Unless y'all have any other questions, except for, let's talk about next meetings. Do y'all want to do the same thing we did last time? I don't think, the intent here to do this twice was to catch a day group and an evening group. I got a lot of criticism for having a day. I think that's not necessary. And we can do this two ways. We can do similar to what we did last time, or I'll be willing to host a couple of meetings to introduce the new options that don't have to be publicized or advertised for a quorum purpose. Still want you there, but the difference would be y'all couldn't all be there at once. So it's depending on which way you want to do that. We need at least one more meeting because next meeting.
I think we had a day meeting and had a lot of good input and a nice turnout.
Mhm.
My thought is we should probably do an evening meeting,
Okay.
just in case somebody couldn't make the day, that maybe they'll have a better chance to make, the night meeting.
Okay. And I'll also leave it flexible that if we just have so many questions, we can kind of host another, just town hall kind of meeting that's not a quorum and just answer questions from anyone that's come up. Because I think we'll have that because the next thing we'll introduce is the uses and special requirements, and there'll probably be a lot of questions with that. So if we need to have another one, we can do that. Okay, the week of the 17th would give us actually enough time. 18th of the 20th? Is that Tuesday or Thursday? We don't have anything, no Mardi Gras or parades or other meetings. Would either of those work?
I think either one's fine.
Okay.
Nothing's gonna
We
work.
talking about in the evening now?
Yeah.
All right, in the evening. What do you call in the evening? 5 o'clock?
5 o'clock? Same as this meeting, I think that.
Pick a day, I don't care.
So nothing's gonna
So-
work for everybody, so let Emily pick it.
February 18th, is that what you're saying? 18th or 20th?
Or the 20th, yes.
So a Tuesday or a Thursday?
But you
Came to the
choose.
last one, I'll come to the next one.
Thank you.
Yeah, we can't make everybody. I'm sure there'll be somebody with a conflict for each of those.
Just pick one, Emily.
Yeah.
Which one? 18.
Sounds 18. All right.
You said 5 o'clock?
5 o'clock?
Where? Here? Where?
We had a problem last time. Do we know if this room is available?
I don't know if this room is available. They don't have a normally scheduled meeting on Tuesday nights in this room.
Right.
Tuesdays would be Corey's.
The problem is if we have it and then advertise it, we
Yeah, I
can send an
double
amendment
check.
because this is just a work session. Yeah.
I'll send out as soon as I verify that this is available or if we have to have it.
I think there was a lot of value to a round table. I think maybe we should add roundtable and then get back together at the end, so.
I kind of like that informal. You got so much more input that way, and I think a lot of changes came from it.
I do. I absolutely agree.
What you talking about over at the Nick
The
Center?
Nick Center.
Yeah. And I don't want to put that burden on the Nick Center folks. That was kind of we had to do
Library is a
that.
good
Why
place,
not?
too.
It was a great place, but man, they pulled together for us, and with our recordings and everything, it was behind the scenes. There was a lot going on, and a lot of folks would think.
I
So
want to get
I
in
owe
on
a lot of
that.
lunches.
What was that, a poker game going on in that other room?
that's right, bridge.
Oh, bridge. Oh.
I owe a lot of lunches to folks. So, what about next in the Civic Center? We can have roundtables there.
Yes.
If we can say here at
Yeah,
City
let's
Hall.
just- Let's just let Emily let us know where when
Okay.
y'all can figure that out.
Okay.
Y'all can figure that out and just let us know.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Okay.
And you're gonna remind us too, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Want me to cook barbecue?
Yes, sir.
Okay. 5 o'clock on the 18th, the location to be determined.
And that is everything for this meeting, right?
That is it.
All right, we're gonna have our public input after, but do I have a motion to adjourn for our normal February 3rd commission meeting?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. All right, we have in our regulations something we did. People got concerned a number of years ago that there's no time in our meetings. So y'all go if you want. There's no, we're doing another meeting.
You're welcome to speak.
But that there's no time in our meetings for people just to come up and vent anything that's not on a particular subject specific. That they, anything from, what we're doing about this to what we're doing about that in general. So I think about 7 years ago, we decided to have one time a year a meeting when people can come up and make suggestions that they feel like need to be made about how we're doing on different things. So at that time, we'll do this. I'd rather this not be, since we've got another meeting about the Greeno Road overlay, I'd rather this not just be a total Greeno Road overlay meeting, but if that's it, so be it, because we've got another meeting on that when we're gonna listen to input and discuss that, and then we're gonna have another meeting here. But with this, just whatever you want to talk about, tell us what kind of a job we're doing, what you'd like us to change, anything in general. And we generally allow each member about 5 minutes to speak. So I've got Gary Grover listed first. Gary, I see you back there.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name's Gary Gover. I live at 300 Lincoln Street in Fairhope. I have a handful of items I'd like to present. They're in a sort of a memorandum form. So let me go through these memos.
And I should say this also, if I could interrupt you, I apologize. If anything presented, we will give to Emily that will make the minutes. So just so that you know that.
Yes. Honorable Planning Commissioners, the Fairhope Senior Center hosts a weekly 2-hour meeting for members wanting to engage in discussion. That group engages in this activity and currently has 15 members who are named below in this memorandum. For several months, the group has discussed public school education in Fairhope, and among other things, has identified impact fees as a way to assist Fairhope schools in meeting needs due to growth of the community. They have met with a retired teacher, and they have met with a school board member. They have familiarized themselves with relevant state and local guidelines, studies, and legislation. They wish to make the following recommendation. Amend the Fairhope Impact Fee Ordinance to add a defined benefit area for public schools. Establish and keep a budget account for the public school impact fees. Obtain a study to set the public school impact fees and add public schools to the Fairhope impact fee schedule. All the important supporting citations from guidelines and laws are attached. And that's my first item. So, I'm gonna-
That would not come, I don't think, planning and zoning, we don't set impact
Education.
fees. That would go to the city council. But one
It'll
thing I'll
wind up
tell you
with
is that
building.
impact fees are not real good for, they're good for building parks and projects. They're not real good for education in the sense that they go up and down. When the economy's great, they're tremendously high. When the economy is lousy, when education's at its worst, budgeting-wise, you get no money that way. And I'm not sure, can impact fees be used for education?
I'm not sure what that, if there is, schools are on that. I know you can for parks and amenities for schools, but I don't think you can for
They're for capital
it's
expenditures.
two
police and
separate-
fire,
Yeah.
parks,
Police,
roads.
fire, parks, rec. I'm not sure if we can do them for schools.
Because that's the Board of Education. That's
Because
a
that would go to the
separate
city council.
Lot of money.
Yeah.
Okay, the next item I have is that the Triangle Conservancy will present at the next Fairhope Environmental Advisory Board regular meeting on Friday, February 14th at 3 p.m. at the Fairhope Single Tax Corporation Boardroom in the library. So I'd like you to consider to please come to the meeting and learn firsthand about their recommendation for the Triangle property and to engage with them to discuss their
What
recommendations.
is that time again, Gary?
It's 3 o'clock on February 14th. It'll be about an hour altogether.
That's a week from Friday. Perfect,
Mm-hmm.
thank you.
Who are they making the presentation to?
To the Environmental Advisory Board, and it's an open public meeting, so whoever comes.
You invite city council since they've got,
We'll
Most of
invite,
the
we would
decisions.
invite everybody to come. This is an important issue. Here's a minor item that I've discovered. The zoning ordinance, Article 4, site design standards, B, screening, lighting, and landscaping materials, sub 5, fencing, states that fences in all residential zoning districts are subject to the following requirements. No barbed wire, razor wire, or similar materials are allowed except for fences used for agricultural purposes in the RA districts. Further, fences in all non-residential zoning districts are subject to the following. No corrugated metal sheets, solid sheets of metal, plywood, particle board, barbed wire, razor wire, or a similar material shall be allowed. The way I read that is that within the city limits, there's only one permitted use of barbed wire, and that's in residential agricultural zones. But I find that Fairhope's electric substations, its water towers, its post office, the colony at the Grand, the correction center, and the armory, and perhaps other locations, have fences topped with barbed wire. So there's a kind of a disconnect, I think, between this practice that has been done over the years and the zoning ordinance. And it might be worth taking a look at that and making some kind of an adjustment to correct the discrepancy.
We could add that if you back up to a dais yard, you could have razor wire or barbed wire, maybe.
Last thing I have is that I came across a really interesting article on electrical vehicle charging stations. It suggests that local governments and state governments all over the nation are scrambling to deal with the growing number of electric vehicles on the roads. I see an awful lot of Tesla automobiles around town. And I expect that people with Teslas and other electric vehicles are going to be coming to Fairhope as tourists, and they're going to look for places to recharge these things. The charging of the electric vehicles as they become increasingly popular with the communities is going to have an impact on infrastructure. And there's going to have to be likely some changes to the regulations affecting infrastructure to accommodate what's going to happen here with these vehicles. So I think this article kind of opens your eyes with a short read, and it's probably something we want to get out in front of, okay?
Yeah, you know, with the parking lot that the Single Tax Corporation built for the city on the north of the library has a charging station for cars free of charge. I haven't seen it used ever.
How about golf
But it's
carts? I'm always
there.
running out of battery.
But it's there. Now that I mentioned it, I might see I might see Holly parked there from time to time. It's within walking distance of McSherry's too, if you need to.
Many thunderstorms as we have, get you a long lightning rod to charge that battery.
Okay.
You know,
And
Asheville, North Carolina has those parking spaces.
so let me just say that I really appreciated when there was an annual opportunity for the public to provide some input to planning process in January of each year. But I think it would be nice if the opportunity existed at every meeting for some input, because things come up all the time. Don't really want to save them up for the first of the year. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Gary.
We appreciate you too.
And Chairman, just to reiterate, the zoning code does allow, there's a couple of ways with issues to talk about before a meeting, come to you or council to sponsor something if it needs to be
Kind of
discussed.
old or new business. So.
Yeah.
All right, I don't see the bishops left, and Brett is not here. Is Mona Barfield here? In that case, we've got you are the Alpha and the Omega, Gary, so that's everybody. I will accept a motion to adjourn.
I thought we already adjourned.
That was for that meeting. This is a separate meeting. This is our annual.
What you get to say is, let's go home.
All in favor, say aye.